Hello there. Welcome to the Antlered Crown podcast, where we discuss brews, witchcraft, spirituality, and more.
We hope through conversation we can continue to learn something new from ourselves and each other.
So come on in.
Welcome to the Antlered Crown podcast, and today we have on an author, Ingrid Kincaid, and we're going to just talk a little bit more about what we're enjoying in our practices as well as rooms.
Yeah, awesome.
Welcome.
So, first thing I was actually, you're not just an author though, obviously. I was going to leave your introduction up to you very much because I love the way that you introduce yourself, the way you did in your book as well. I thought it was a fantastic way, and I thought it'd be best if I left that open to you.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, not just an author, right?
Yeah.
I would say I am a teacher,
Mm.
and my writings come out of the gift I have of teaching, which allows me to be with people and to interact. Because when you teach, you learn as much as you give.
Yeah.
I would also say that entering into I'm actually closer to 80 years old than I am to 70.
Mhm.
So, I speak of myself as an elder, as a wise woman.
Mm.
And I find that in the work that I've been doing for so many years, there aren't a lot of elders.
Yeah.
And particularly, there's not a lot of elders who are the old wise women. And I hesitate to use, not because I have an aversion to crone or hag or those kinds of words, but I really don't believe that we enter into that part of life until we're maybe in our 80s and 90s.
No.
So that's why I speak of this period of wise woman. And I do believe we're missing the elders.
Mm.
I really do believe that. So when I teach and when I call people together, it's from that place, and that you may not agree with what I say. You may go all the way around the circle and come back to wherever you started. However, I ask questions. That's, if you notice that in the book.
Yeah.
That a lot of it is questions, because it isn't about I know everything and I'm going to show you and teach you and convince you. But have you ever wondered about this? Have you ever thought about that? Because what it is an invitation then for you to explore what deeper, on a deeper level, and maybe a different perspective. What do you actually hold to be true, and how can you speak about it? Because there's so many in the spiritual community, particularly in what I lump New Age, but in that, sadly, is also pagan heathen. There's just these gurus, this tendency to have a guru, and then for you might as well just stay a Christian then if you want to follow the leader, right?
Mhm.
Instead of finding your way. So I would say, first and foremost, I am a teacher, and out of my teaching and my experience as a learner has come my writing.
Excellent. I love that. That's one of the things that struck me first was what my own kind of discovery in spirituality, but also practicing, is that what truth means and how it's fluid as well. It's such a thing that I found that two things exist at the same time. Truth doesn't exist, and it does. Truth is something that exists only in the present. Yeah. If you look ahead, it's undecided. If you look behind, it's gone. It's only really valid now. And it's where I try and keep myself and my practice is in the center, in that sense. And it's something I recognized in your book, that's a very similar line it runs along. And I that's what I loved at first when reading it, because I was like, I know that this is the person I want to learn about runes from. But just from as I got to that point, I was like, it speaks my language in what I would want to learn, rather than as you say, otherwise same with Christianity, it's someone else's perspective, and everyone's trying to fit their narrative through that perspective, and it can't work. We have to ask ourselves those questions. What does this mean to me? I know what it means to them, but what does it mean to me? And trust it enough,
Yes, yeah. And it really is dependent on the 5 questions are so beautiful. Where are you? I'm working currently with a woman in Australia. We have to do the wheel completely other way around, because we're going into winter, she's going into summer.
Yeah.
And so when I look at the month of November for her, it isn't the month of the offering, because it isn't going into winter.
Yeah.
And so that then is what is true. Well, it's true for me that it's almost winter, but that's not true for her.
Yeah.
Because she lives in when she asks that question, where am I? What time is it? That's relevant in the now, in the present moment, for where she is, not, and where I am is another place.
Yeah.
And so when I was gifted that map, over a long period of time, being awakened in the middle of the night by the ancestors, by the runes, beings, whatever you want to call it. It was on the ceiling in the bedroom in the dark that I kept seeing these things and seeing the words and the questions, and then so I started teaching it. There's the teacher. And from the teaching, then I was able to formulate what worked, what didn't, what made sense, how could I speak about it. And that's how then the book developed, was from that living what it is that's happening, so that it's in a way that can be relevant to anyone at any time reading that book, that hopefully they can utilize it to answer their own question of, who am I standing in the middle?
Yeah.
It's beautiful practice.
I love that. It's one of those things also, you can open the book anywhere, and there's something that you can draw from it. You can apply it to something that's happening. I love that. It's wonderful. Really.
And you don't even need to follow the runes. That's also, I've had people that have come to me and not particularly interested in the runes, and they use the guideline of it, because it can address anything, personal question, job. There's a woman in Glastonbury who found my book, and she serves as a pagan prison chaplain. She actually goes to prisons to represent the pagans, and she uses a labyrinth. And she asked for my permission. Could she use the questions from the book when the prisoners walk the labyrinth and come to the center and stand there? Can she use the questions for them to answer, which has been something deeply profound that has happened for many of these individuals whose lives are quite constricted, but that she can use the question. So that also has really made me just this being in awe and feeling gratitude for having been the tool, a tool used by the ancestors to perhaps bring something forward that's meaningful and different.
Yeah, I love that. I tell you, so there's one question before we go over the other question, actually, which is something I usually ask people is what are you currently enjoying in your spiritual practice at the moment? I know that you're in Cornwall at the moment.
Yeah.
Which is, I love Cornwall.
I love Cornwall.
It's
a beautiful place.
It really is.
It's my first visit here. I lived in Stevenage in Hertfordshire for 2.5 years, but that was in the 70s, so that was a long time ago. And I come back here quite often. So what I'm currently enjoying, I would say it's multifaceted. One is that I've been doing this work for a very long time, and when I started out, there were not many of us. So maybe Ralph Blum's little rune book, people, or some of Nigel Pennick's writings, but there was really a desert. And so all the years, it has been lovely to see a growing awareness. And I truly attribute that to the melting of the ice. And I know that's so controversial, and everybody has their own horror stories about, global warming. And okay, folks, the Earth has done this before, over and over again. It's melted the ice, it's frozen the water, it's upheaval and destruction. And I believe that as the ice is melting in the north, we're actually being led north. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more discoveries that are going to turn things upside down with regard to what we have been taught and manipulated and led to believe about civilizations and cultures. And that what existed in the north is perhaps much older even, but it's not been accessible because it's been frozen. And now there's this releasing, and energetically, I really do believe that that's what I feel, the enjoyment of. Ice is a crystal. Crystals hold energy, crystals hold information. The main rune, if you think of Isa as a single line, which all the runes are formed from, every rune comes from a single line.
Yeah.
If you lay it like a glacier, then you see all these releasings of information as the ice melts. The crystal releases the energy, which is releasing the knowing and the remembering.
Yeah.
And that this is the opening up to another way to be with the runes, which isn't the popular, and it isn't the male dominant, chest thumping, Viking hollering, horn wearing, all that. This is like teenage boys acting out some kind of macho. I can talk this way. It's like
We agree.
No, we agree.
it's like, come on, folks. So that's what's exciting to me, is to have lived long enough and to have stayed with this, so that I'm observing what I wrote about many years ago, spoke about. The ice is melting, the runes are being revealed. Something is coming out that we haven't, it was never gone. It was just held in time. And we need what the runes teach, we need. We really need right now. We don't need more desert wisdom. We don't need desert gods. We don't need jungle gods. We've been missing the gods of the north.
Yeah, I agree. It's that very thing. Actually, you and I were talking about that not long ago, about water.
Yeah.
There's that study that someone shows pictures to water and then freezes the water, and the water freezes as the image. But the interesting thing is, it doesn't freeze identical. Sometimes they just think of the picture to the water, and then they freeze it, and as it begins to freeze, it takes the form of what they're thinking.
Yes.
And it flips everything upside down of what we know water to be, which makes complete sense. Water's been here for so long. It has a consciousness of its own. It stores and remembers things, and it has this consciousness. And yet, within the ice, the same thing. There's so much that it has seen. I always think of water as this. It's passed through everything. It's passed through every single thing. It's touched everything in some way or another, through it changing and it evaporating. It's been everything. And with that means it's been the wisdom and the experience of everything that it's been around. And so therefore, like what you said, it makes sense that as it begins to melt, more of this experience that has become locked is being let out. And it's amazing. It really is.
It's exciting too for me. I love what I do. I really, it's just my whole life, and I just love it.
Yeah.
It's not a weekend Renaissance fair with a costume on.
Yeah.
And for me too, one of the things I can bring is that I live in a city. I live in Portland, Oregon. It's not a huge city, but it's a pretty good sized city. I
Yeah.
live inner city. I have sidewalks and roads and trams and river with boats on it. And how can this ancient wisdom that comes from the forces of nature, how can it work for you? I don't have to go off grid and live out in the mountains or the heather or whatever. How can I live it here with a flower coming through a sidewalk and show people that this information, these vital principles of life can be used no matter where you are, if you'll stand in the center and ask yourself, what do I need? Because it's all there. The runes give it all. I without dogma,
Yeah.
and without laws and commandments and all that. It's neutral. They are neutral. I know those I get excited because your questions are so good.
Oh, thank you.
Like, yes.
Yeah.
Finally somebody asked me a question.
As a matter of fact, should we ask?
Yeah, go
Okay.
dive right in.
So, first question was, what or when did you, I say, discover or rediscover the runes, as it were?
Okay. And I would say remember is the word that what happened for me.
Right.
So you can visualize me living in the San Francisco Bay Area, selling real estate. I was a estate agent, I sold real estate in San Francisco, California. I had a 30-year career with it, believe it or not. So I had a very different life, la-da-da, selling $1 million houses to corporate CEOs in Silicon Valley, all that. Drove a fancy car, had a nice house with a swimming pool. And I was sitting at a house one day that, as an agent, having it open for the public to come in and out. It was very quiet. Nobody was coming. There was a bag kind of like this, sitting on the table, and I was like, well, that's interesting. I wonder what's in there. And I dumped it out onto the table. And in a moment, an instant, and it was full of runes. And in that instance, it was like, I know what those are. That was one voice. And Ingrid, the real estate agent, said, no, you don't. And said, oh, no, I know what those are. And then it was like, oh, I also know what they mean. That was like this really strange, as if I entered into some portal. And I remember so clearly saying, excuse me if I swear, this is going to really fuck up my life. So I stuck them back in the pouch and I pulled the strap like that and put it down, and it's like, no. Because it was so clear that it was something I was remembering that was very ancient, that I never studied that wasn't on my radar. I wasn't something looking for. And I knew in that moment that if I went that way, my life would really not be the same. The thing is that I didn't have a choice, because they wouldn't leave me alone. And I believe that it was because I had acknowledged what they were, and because I'd recognized them, the energy there was, you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
Or on pain of suffering, pain and suffering. So that's actually how that came to me. And then they just, and eventually I stopped my career. I had a huge upheaval, that's a personal story, but a huge upheaval. My life completely turned upside down. And then I really said, no, this is something I have to do. I don't have an option.
Yeah.
I would say for me, I believe that the rune beings and the ancestors are seeking, they want to be heard. I believe that they're seeking out different individuals and who live different lifestyles or ways of life. I was born on a small a cattle ranch in Northern California. I grew up deer hunting, and we killed cows. My grandmother had a butcher shop.
Mhm.
I have that and my father's from Texas. So there's all of this kind of different energy than somebody living in New York City.
Mm.
So and you'll notice that in my books, that the way I write, I come from, when I say the horse dies, get off. That, I mean, that really comes from experience. My grandfather really said that to me, it's like, get off your horse if it's dead, stop trying to ride it.
Yeah.
So I believe that, and I would say chosen or singled out, not because I'm special, but because I have a certain kind of voice.
Yeah.
And the way that I can speak about this ancient knowledge is in a voice that resonates with certain kinds of people. Maybe not everyone, but people read that and will come to me and say, I knew what you were talking about, because you speak in language. Because you might notice I never talk about white light and high vibrations and excess. I just don't.
Yeah.
And it's needed. So that's how they came to me. They tapped me on the shoulder and said, bingo, you get to do this whether you want to or not. And
Ain't
here we
that the
are.
way?
Yeah.
You probably relate to it yourself, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was an archaeologist. And that's what I loved. I absolutely loved archaeology. But things happened in my life, and the thing is, my aunts did this, and they always said, this is what you'll do. And I kind of was like, I don't want to do that, because they told me to. Mainly, I don't want to do that. So I did archaeology. And then I went to live in America, and it just happened. I was like, well, I'll let people know this other side of me. I'll show this other side of me after hiding it for so long. And it happened.
Exploded.
It just went. That was it.
Mhm.
And I don't regret it, though. I do not regret it. It gives me something that, as much as I loved archaeology, it's completely different.
Mhm.
It's completely different. Yeah, definitely. Do you want to ask this one, or do you want me to ask?
Sure. Well, that's technically your question, so maybe you
Well,
could ask it.
All right, okay. I find your approach to the runes through the perspective of animism so insightful. Could you tell me what the runes mean to you in that way?
Mhm. I would need, well, first, the rune symbols. So the staves, I see them as signatures. That's how, once I open that up, that's just a signature, just as if I signed my name. You see it, you say, oh, that's Ingrid's. That's how she signs her name.
Yeah.
So I see the staves as signatures of ancient, sentient, vibrational beings, or beings that are forces of aliveness. And in that, then, as an animist, it's not a religion that I've taken on or a spiritual practice. It's a way of living in relationship to all things that are alive.
Yeah.
And once I began to live with the runes as beings, not as things, then I could see where they are represented in, aspects of a rune beings represented in many, many different ways. So that it's not looking at a rune stave and saying, this is what it means. It's looking at the stave and saying, this is who it is.
Yeah.
And I can't know all of that being ever. I could never, I can teach a whole class for an entire day on one rune, and we still don't know it. Just like you couldn't know me, I couldn't know you. So coming into that place as an animist is to allow for the bigness of the all of each individual rune being. And then they're related and interconnected with each other, sometimes in different places, but and they are related and connected to all that is alive. And that's why it's not a set of rules or commandments or anything like that. It's about an experience. An animist experiences life.
Yeah, I love that. It is very much that. It's like anything. It has everything has such a depth to it that we can never really fully know it all in that way. And I love the way you describe it. It is like a signature. It means something different to every person and their relationship with it. And that's the wonderful. I often say that to people in the way of like, it's like looking at the moon. You know, we can both look at the moon from different points in the world, and it will look very different, and it will give us a very different feeling when we look at it. But it's the same moon. You know, it has so much that it can be all at once. And I think humanity, especially nowadays, we're conditioned to see things as it's either this or that. And when it comes to spirits, they are one and everything. They are so many things at the same time, and they often can contradict themselves. And that's trying to remain open to anything. You know, I think that's half the battle, is as long as we remain open and we understand that, you know, it may conflict with the truth that we previously knew, but as long as we're open to receive new truth, then we're always going to get a truer message than what we previously know. As one of the things is that I'm always very careful with things that I do read, because when you read something, you know it. You don't have to believe it, but you know it, and then it influences what you do next, regardless, and what you think of something. Which is why I love your book so much, because it's something that as I started to read it, I was like, this is something I want to know. This is something that aligns with what I believe as well. So oftentimes I read a book and I disagree with the book, but at the same time it leaves a conflict then, and it hinders me more than it would help me sometimes, you know. And so I love that approach to it, as well as the runes, the fact that they are completely almost eternal in how much that they can offer as well, and what they can become, what they can be. I love that. It's fantastic.
And perhaps they are becoming also, I mean, who are we to imagine them as being static, that they're so ancient that they're not changing. It goes back to, so is the earth ancient, and she's always changing, she's always surprising us. So why would that not be true for these beings, that they are ever changing, and that just as we get to know an aspect, just like in a relationship, you will never know everything about the person you are in relationship with, because they are changing just as you are. And so it's an ongoing journey and experience of being willing to be surprised. Say, well, you always do it this way, and you always, you know, and whenever we put that you always, we've closed the door of something out of the experience of something else happening.
The potential. It's definitely is that. I've learned a lot about allowing things to be as they want to be rather than holding them. I often teach people that if you look objectively at people, they're afraid. Fear governs them, and oftentimes it's fear of change. You know, people, they cut their hair, they wash their car, they paint their houses, they cut their lawn. Everything is so much energy put into making things look like they're the same, keeping things to a standard where they feel in control in this bubble, because they separate themselves from what they think is a chaotic agents of change, and they're not. They're necessary. I've said this before. I think that the universe only has one law that all things have to follow, is that everything has to change. Nothing's allowed to stay the same forever, and it's just humans are so stubborn that they're the only ones who actually think, no, I can stay the same. It's fine, you know. And when we do, we often get hit with a big wave, you know.
Yes, or I call it the fly swatter of life. Understand that, right?
This next one was, what does the web of word or weird mean to you, and how do the runes play a part in understanding it?
Oh, these are such beautiful questions.
Thank you.
So I see life as a weaving, as a tapestry. So that's also, web is a similar kind of word. So I see the warp threads on the loom, the vertical warp threads are in place. They're there by the Norns, they're there by the gods, the goddesses, the giants, it doesn't matter. So each of us enters the story in a different place. I asked that question, where did you enter the story? Because it's an ongoing, there is no ending and beginning. So this beautiful weaving, the warp threads are always there. We are birthed into that and we become the weft. So we have a certain amount of choice and, I don't like the word control, but opportunity to participate with threads that we weave into that which already is.
Yes.
So, I'm going to take linen and it's red and I'm going in and out and up and down between the warp. But the warp, I have no control over the warp because, when you're born, your mom and dad are your mom and dad, whether you like it or not. And where your mother was when she gave birth to you, you can't change. So those are warp threads. You get to participate now with your own thread and your own color and your own material and all of that. So that to me is what the web of the weird is set in place and participating. And so when at birth, let's say if a Norn is there, however you believe or speak about that, but one of the Norns is present at your birth and she says, here's your loom and here's the thread set, now you get to play, and here's a basket full of stuff which gets to be woven. Then when I think of that on a bigger scale, it becomes the matrix. It becomes the matrix of the cosmos or the gap, the void, however we want to speak about it. And that when I see the rune signatures, the rune staves, I see them as being part of and also making up the great matrix, the great web.
Right.
And so that no matter where you look in this weaving, this crossing, you can always find a rune, because the rune stave doesn't end with, here's the Fehu rune and it just is there static, because that's how we've written them, but they're not static. So they extend, the bottom and the top keep going and the diagonals keep going. And in that, then the next rune touches it and it becomes another rune. So it's the genealogy, they form and inform each other. And that they're in that. I also, when I work with runes, I look for what other shapes are there. Who came in this reading? Who showed up? How many different shapes showed up to tell this particular story? And, like all the runes are with a single vertical line, or maybe I have no runes with a single vertical line. And so that to me is also how the runes work within the web.
Oh, I see.
And then how they participate also with you as you've woven into the loom.
Yeah.
And that rune comes through and touches you and activates you, because they vibrate. The web and the matrix is always vibrating in the aliveness. So the runes are vibrating, and then you become the instrument. And when that vibrates through you, if you're out of tune, you make a bad sound. So then it gives you that chance to tune with it.
Yeah.
Which leads probably into the next question. I don't believe that there's just a set of runes. I believe there is endless, like the stars, and that how they cross and crisscross and activate and be, for us to imagine them as being limited is an arrogance and also a shrinking.
Yeah.
And so in that, then I believe, and I also encourage anyone that I work with, pay attention to when you see shapes and you feel in yourself that that's a rune, write it down.
Yeah.
And write down where you were, what you were thinking about, what was happening around you, because I feel that there's going to be a time where more and more rune shapes are coming out, and there will be collective awareness. Raven Caldera speaks of that in his book, the Jotunbok, about personal gnosis, but that also there's a collection of individuals that begin to have the same experience, like, oh, here's a new shape, makes a different sound, and this has appeared to me and you, and all of a sudden it becomes part of the collection.
Right.
Is that
Yeah. That's
so?
when I first met you, you used to constantly draw this shape. Do you remember? I don't know. It was when we first met years ago, and you sent me a picture. You said, "Is this a rune?" I said, "Why?" And she went, "Because I keep drawing it. I've always drawn it." And I said, "It's not. It's not a rune. I don't know what it is." And we never knew what that was. But do you remember?
I do remember that, but I don't remember what it looks like anymore.
It looked like, it's difficult to. I vaguely remember it, but that I never forgot that, because that was always one thing that I was never able to discover. But I think, like as you were saying there, it reminded me of it, because it's at the same time I was looking for something that already existed. I wasn't open to something that was new.
Yes.
And looking at it again now, I was asking, as you say, but I was asking the wrong questions.
Yes.
You should have been asking, what does it mean, rather than what does it look like? Yeah.
And so that's the case to me of it's melting out of the ice.
Yeah.
I know a person who's drawn a particular shape, a very unusual kind of shape thing, looks almost like a satellite type of thing, but all straight lines. And it's like, this is a rune. I don't know what it's about yet, but it's a rune. Because the word rune means a whispered secret, as far as that. It's also the word we use shorthand for the stave, the stick. But it's a whispered, you were given a whispered secret. And so the question is, yes, that is a rune. I just don't know yet who it is, who showed up here.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's cool.
So that to me is also why the ice is melting, more runes will be revealed. For instance, the Lagos rune. So Lagos is the rune of water. Okay, well, that's the simplistic.
Yeah.
But I will say there has to be a rune for salt water.
Yeah.
It's different from fresh water. There has to be a rune for rainwater, water that's in a lake, water that's in a river, water that's held in fog.
Yeah.
And because there's a complexity, there's a simplification. Like this is my arm. Yes. But I have fingers and wrists and elbow and shoulders, all up my arm. So here's the Lagos. And then what are all the fine tuning of, you're learning a new language, and maybe all you know is the word for arm. But as you learn the language, you learn elbow and shoulder and wrist. So that's also, and we'll just keep going, because you asked me how many do I use. And long ago, I moved away from the simple, 24 runes of the Elder Futhar. Into what I call the runes of the giants. I really believe that the Anglo-Northumbrian runes are more complex, and I feel they represent even older beings. And then there's also, you can look at the younger Futhar. There are nuances in them that give other ways of seeing something or understanding it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do believe that we can't limit them. That's what I work with now, because that's what has come to me that I'm the most familiar with. However, if, for instance, you look at the Wunyo rune, it's got the Kenaz at the top. The Thurizas has Kenaz in the middle. I believe there's a rune that has Kenaz at the bottom. What is that rune?
Right.
But is there a progression between joy and chaos? You know, if you slide that up and down, or the same
Yeah.
with Avas, slide the Kenaz up and down the vertical
Yeah.
state. And what does it mean if it's at the bottom, in the middle, at the top? What if it mean if it comes pointing down or pointing up?
Yeah.
Algis, then it becomes Tevas. So there's this dynamic movement of them talking to each other and creating new shapes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my sense is that the fixation, so there's a fixation on the elder Futhark, and it's usually fixated on by the Odinists. These are the original runes. These are the runes, you know, this is the Bible that Jesus read.
Yeah.
And I believe where that comes from is back to this patriarchal, male dominant kind of lens that we see them through.
Mm-hmm.
The high God, the All Father, this sounds like a Bible story to me. But the high God, the All Father, starved himself and died of thirst and stabbed himself hanging on a tree. That sound familiar? And then he reached down into the water, into the well, and he grabbed up the runes. Well, one, he didn't grab all the runes. Two, he had no business taking them out of the well. The well's guarded by the Nornir, and the Nornir are older and wiser than he is, because he goes to them for wisdom. So this entitled male, maybe he was, I think of him like a spoiled teenager sometimes. It's like, I'm going to do this,
Mm-hmm.
beat my chest and grab some runes and say they're mine.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, no, they're not yours. You took something from the sacredness of all and claim that they belong to you. How can you own the runes?
Yeah.
How can they be your runes? And so that 24 elder Futhark and sticking it with the Odin and that the purist, to me, is really a travesty. It's a great disrespect and a dishonoring of these beings, and also the guardian who guards them, who guards the web, who takes care of the tree, and it's why I think it goes back more to the sacred origin, which is another story that I tell, and you know, I'm off on that, but to step away, and this is where we get fixated on the Vikings too, which is that little 200-year period in history. It's like the runes don't belong to the Vikings. Are you kidding?
No.
And so if your introduction is through that, you're going to have this warrior dominant, conquering, whatever, bloodletting ideology that goes around the runes, and that's not true.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I would say thinking of them as an alphabet is part of what allowed them to be preserved, the ones that we do have. I do believe that during the time when you could be killed for, you know, tattooing a rune, or even having it carved someplace, I do believe that it was part of the brilliance of how to preserve what we had in a way that was under the radar.
Yeah.
So it became an alphabet.
Yeah. I can
And
see that.
then it got frozen as an alphabet, and people still think of them as alphabets, but it's letters of an alphabet. They're not an alphabet.
Yeah.
They're a tapestry.
Yeah.
Of being a tapestry of individual beings that vibrate with wisdom.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't just use the 20, the 24 are part of my 33, but maybe the next book I write will have 67. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I love also your that thing of that's one of my main things is because constantly in readings and different things people mention Odin to me. And I'm always against it because to me Odin's not the good guy. Even the image that is portrayed of Odin nowadays, and there are many images, none of them feel right to me. There is someone who claims to have so much wisdom, does a lot of things that I consider to be very unwise. And as you say, that patriarchal, the image of the Aesir holding on to power, being able to write the history books, and then you have the Vanir and you have the Jotun, and yet these are beings that are much more in harmony with elements and earth, and yet you have this. To me, it's almost like a struggle between that which is celestial and that which is terrestrial.
Mhm.
And you have these terrestrial beings trying to live within accordance to life and earth, but then you have a select few, Odin as well, who believe themselves to be greater than this, that they can last longer than this, that they can separate themselves from it. And that's one of the reasons why I've always had this aversion to it. So my way of coming to it was, funnily enough, I will learn the runes. From reading your book, if anything, it's taken me further away from the idea of Odin, but closer to that of the Norns, because the Norns were something that appealed to me previously. I actually had a dream years ago that I was running for a market, and there were these three old women there, and and they told me to shut up because I was very upset. They said, and one of them, she went, shut up like that, and she went, sit down there. And they had a little market stall and they were selling jewelry and things. And they said, sit down, have a cup of tea. And then another one came along and she had bags of shopping, and she said, who's he? He said, don't worry about him, it's fine. But they coaxed things out of me, things that I completely forgot, but things that obviously were some form of a pain to me in my past. And I remember waking up and I was visibly had been crying in my sleep.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do.
It was fascinating, but it was one of the most prominent dreams. And these three elderly ladies just talking to me. But it was from that point I started to lean more towards those sort of things with the Norns. And so I think in a very strange roundabout way, it's all led me to that. And it's got nothing really to do with Odin. Because as you say, there's this self-perpetuating essence of war and ego that comes with it that a lot of people use nowadays. And it just doesn't align to me at all. It feels like a massive step backwards rather than forwards.
It's about ownership, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the right to own something that we really have no right to own, or to have a title, to claim something to be called All Father.
Yeah.
It's like what that to me is, however the Eddas were translated by the Catholics,
Yes. Yeah.
And then I always say, well, who was Odin's mother?
Yeah.
She was a giant. She was a giant. Who was Thor's mother? Earth. She was a giantess. We stop at, he's not the all father of anything, because he took something that was already there.
Yeah.
And we don't have to go through him to have the right to that. I mean, that's like, I need the priest to read the Bible so I can go to heaven. This is not animism. There's not an all father.
Yeah.
And that's why also when I read some of the sagas and I think about like the creation story, and my question is, what happened to the cow? If you really think about it, that story was the reindeer. She was a reindeer, not a bovine. I don't believe it was a bovine. This is from the north. And reindeer are called cows. They are cows and bulls, not buck and doe like we do with deer. So this reindeer came out of the blizzard. She gave birth And we know she gave birth because she was lactating.
Yeah.
This is where I can say I come from the farm, you know. I know that the cows don't lactate unless they've had a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this lactating reindeer that births these beings into the ice, and they lick, what they do is the sac around them, they lick the baby to get the birth sac freezes almost instantly, crusts over, so she licks and licks to get it off.
Right.
So the baby can come out and then begin to stand and start to nurse. This is a creation story that's female based.
Yeah.
This is not, you know, Odin and his cronies becoming the All-Father. And so
Yeah.
the question is, why is she written? Where is she? She never appears again.
Yeah.
So what happened to the cow?
Yeah.
Because we don't have the you know, the Odin and company, but forgotten again the essence of she who gives birth, which is the also the cosmos. It's like out of the darkness comes the chaos that comes into form.
Yeah.
And in the denial, the high gods and their wall and their structure is a denial of chaos, which has to happen or life doesn't come from life. Life comes from death.
Yeah.
Things die and then they can grow.
Yeah.
So that to me is that bigger story of why the runes are so brilliantly perfect, because every rune tells you life and death. There's not a single rune that doesn't hold, you know, here's the rune of the mother. Well, when the mother gives birth, she gives birth to death, because whatever is born through her will die.
Yeah. Yeah.
She gives birth to death as well as life. She will also kill her young if there's something wrong. At every single rune you can take and say it teaches the life and the death, and the present moment is present in every single stave and every being that holds that signature.
Yeah.
And that's when I get really like feisty to teach.
Well, as I said, you answered that the other question about how many runes, but this one was this one is you speak of the world tree as an ever-changing constant that shifts to each individual's understanding of it. What does the world tree mean to you, and its significance around the understanding the lessons of the runes?
Okay. So the reason that I would say the world tree is ever changing is back to, it needs to be recognizable by people in all areas in that sense. So it isn't a literal tree. And for you to think it's a tree or a ash tree or a holly tree or whatever.
Yeah.
So tree as a being, to me, is a perfect representation of what is seen and above and what is hidden and below.
Yeah.
And that you can't make one good and one bad. You can't make one right and one wrong, which is what people try to do. The up is better than the down. Go to the high vibration. Nobody ever tells you to go to your low vibration. So the tree is a perfect symbology, because the root can exist without the branches, but the branches can't exist without the root. So here is this, it's an alive, dynamic energy comes up from the soil, fed by waters, the nutrients goes up the trunk into the leaves collect the sunlight, which comes back down, which goes back into the soil. So this always moving energy of aliveness that doesn't declare one aspect to be better than or more important than, or there's no moralizing in a tree. You can't make it moral or immoral. It is. So to me, that's what the world tree represents, that place in which all things exist. And the straight lines, yes, you know, we can take the straight lines of the matrix, but because the gap, the universe, eventually all straight lines curve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's that curving back, which is a collapsing into itself and going out again, which is to me the tree.
Yeah.
And so it's significant on several levels. One, the roots have wells.
Mm.
The wells are guarded by the Norns. The runes are in the wells. The Norns carve the runes on the tree. So to me, it's a beautiful description of the participatory nature, the ongoing participation in the dew comes up into, the leaves, the water comes up, it drips down as dew, it comes back into the well, they carve the roots on the trunk. And so when the energy is going up and down, it's up and down through the rune beings, through the essence and the vibration of this ancient wisdom.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that is how I feel about the tree. And in the meditation in the book, where you go and you imagine that you're walking into the forest, but it's all trees and every tree, but we each have our own calling. Like you might like the oak, and I may be called to the birch, and you to the aspen, and so it's just a way to have this constant, but that can also be personalized and individualized and make sense to you no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's lovely. Oh, it
Yeah.
is. Lovely explanation of it. Really
Wow. Is there
Yeah.
anything you'd like to promote?
is. Yeah.
Myself. I love promoting my books, and my website is my name. So ingridkincaid.com. It's easy to find me. My books are mentioned there. You can find them on the internet under my name. I also I do travel, and I will come someplace if I'm invited to teach or to do long weekends, to work with people individually, because I believe, not that I'm the guru, I feel that there's a gift I have to speak and to share and to talk about things in ways that are different than what many people hear. And I also have limited spots that I open up to individuals who, if they want to mentor with me. I use the wheel in the Lost Teachings book. I use that, and we set a wheel for a year, no matter where you want to start, and and then we select runes, kind of like an astrology type of map. And that's a commitment that someone makes to me and to themselves and to the runes and the ancestors, to complete a cycle, to see what it feels like to live with rune wisdom. So I guess that's all about promoting myself, but that's who I don't have anything else to promote. It's all about me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook as The Antlered Crown, or on YouTube as Elwynn the Witch.
I offer a variety of readings, including bone, tarot, medium connection, and deity guidance, as well as spiritual consultations, which are done live and scheduled via Zoom. I am also offering spell work and custom merchandise, all of which you can find on my website, theantleredcrown.com.
You can also join our community on Patreon and get access to our Discord server, group meetings, one-on-ones with Elwynn, tutorials, discounts, and other goodies, depending on the tier level you choose. And always remember,
Tip your witch, bitch.
bye-bye.
Bye.